And I think it's really important that as a community, as an ecosystem, that we also convey w- what are like we use crypto voter as an identifier, but it actually means a lot of other things, right? So like if you have people who feel that strongly about crypto and identify in that way, chances are they have some like strong thoughts on like the deficit, strong thoughts on freedom of speech, strong thoughts on like all of these other very large, deep democratic issues. And it kind of gets rolled up and like crypto voter gets put on the top and people are like, oh, like 22-year-olds living in their mom's basement playing video games. It's like, no, that's not what we're talking about.
Welcome back to the Block Fuel podcast. We have Blue Macellari, head of digital asset strategy at Rowe Price, joining us. Blue, excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, love it for you taking some time. Would love to dive in first to your origin story. What brought you to like the DC area, living in Maryland? What brought you to Rowe Price? What really brought you into digital assets in the first place?
Yeah. So my crypto story is, I think, possibly a little different from other people's. So I had always been in financial markets. I'd always been an emerging markets credit macro analyst, mostly at hedge funds, private equity, and did a lot of distressed. I was at Lehman during the bankruptcy. That was fun. And so I kind of had always spent my investing career looking at sovereign balance sheets, looking at debt metrics, thinking about sort of those macro factors. And in 2017, I was living in Brazil. I'd been living in Brazil for, I guess, 4 or 5 years at that point. And we moved to Brazil because my husband became the deputy governor of the Central Bank of Brazil,
Oh,
which
wow.
is like, don't tell the crypto people I'm married to a central banker, right?
Yeah.
So, and I have like since orange pilled him, it was like a very slow process, but when he became deputy governor of the central bank, I had to take a leave of absence because they never had a wife who worked in markets who traded EM, right?
Oh.
And so I would go as the like wives and girlfriends to like the G20, the G30, the BIS, the IMF, the BRICS summit, like all of these different things. And I got this inside look on like how the international monetary policy sausage is made. And it was a little disconcerting. I was like, really? This is it? This is the plan? This is
Yeah.
what you guys are doing? And and so that sort of combined with this like EM background, I began using crypto PA to be able to move, like we're a dual currency household. And so we began using crypto to be able to move money back and forth
Mm.
between Brazil and the US, which is really expensive and really difficult, right? And I had a good friend who was an equity arb trader, and he was like, come launch a market neutral crypto fund with me. And I was like, well, I'm directional, I'm credit, but yeah, that sounds amazing. Let's go do it. And so we did. And the fund launched in January of 2018, like just in time to coincide with like the crypto winter. But what it meant was that most of my experience was both market neutral in crypto for a very long time, and it was institutional in nature, right? So I didn't have to make that jump of, oh, it's okay to do it this way in your PA, but like you can't do it that way in an institution. Um, I was used to sort of an institutional setup from the beginning, and it was learning by doing because nobody, very few people did that back
Yeah.
then.
Mhm.
And so we moved back to the US, and then I joined T Rowe almost exactly 2 years ago to build an institutional sort of crypto business within T Rowe.
Wow. That is definitely at the top of the list of some of the interesting journeys that you've had into this space. And definitely very cool, though. I don't think, Jody, I don't think we've had anybody that's been that close to any monetary fund or things like that. So definitely very cool. But, what are some of the challenges you've faced when developing like an institutional crypto investment thesis? It's not like one day you were just like, oh, I'm just going to do this. Like, because I mean, there's a lot of uphill battles, I think, that you've had to fight. And, I think a lot of people in this industry have to do that.
Yeah. So I think one of the important things was that when I joined T Rowe, there was the emphasis on learning. So we very much took the approach, we're going to do hands-on learning and we're going to progress. And so we're going to simultaneously build like operational capability for the hands-on learning because it's an operational technology, right? And operations is a source of alpha in digital assets in a way that it isn't in most asset classes. I feel like derivatives are probably the exception to that. And then simultaneously, sort of building out the investment thesis and refining it. And I think of the challenges as sort of three tiers. So I would say the top one is like debunking myths and like preconceived notions, right? So crypto's bad for the environment, or crypto's only used for illicit activities, or it's a Ponzi scheme, or blockchain great, crypto bad, right? So you kind of have to start with those and then you work on those and you just address them like on a fact basis. You're like, yes, I think like, in 2012 or 14, many of those might have been true in a way that they aren't now. But once you sort of get past that piece, the question is an asset class perspective. And I think this is really critical when you have a really large institutional investor, right? The asset classes are really clearly defined. So you have fixed income, you have equities, you have multi-asset, right? You have private. And digital assets doesn't fit neatly into any of those categories. And so you sort of need to take an interdisciplinary approach. You need to sort of say, no, this does not look like a DCF model, or no, this does not look like, convertible bond. How do you combine some of like the income features along with like the return profile or the sort of tokenomics? And there's a part of it that's definitely like, what is the institutional version of having like a Bitcoiner over for Thanksgiving dinner? Like, what does that model look like? If you were like, here, do it in Excel, right? Like make all those arguments, put on your tinfoil hat, but do it in Excel. And that's, I think, a really important piece of it. And that's what we've done. So like our investment thesis group, we have quants, we have fixed income, we have equity analysts, of course, and we have multi-asset quant. And I come from a macro sort of fixed income background. And so we sort of, everybody bring your best models. And then like, we're going to mash them up and, modify them and grow them in a way that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah. And Blue, just continuing on that thread, like, what would you say just to like, those that have, I think since really COVID, a lot of people got really into investing and, things were exciting when you had 2020 and you had this suddenly liquidity injection coming into the market. So, these big stocks that took off, but also for all these digital assets also took off. And then, people started to realize, oh, like, hey, when liquidity dries up, when interest rates rise, there's a lot of challenges and you don't have those tailwinds. Coming into the space with, existing knowledge and, understanding, say, these different DCF models or fixed income, like what would you say to people trying to learn more about the markets? And what would you say is like some of the things that like institutional investors like know and approach it with that retail doesn't do as much? I know this is like maybe not something you're always thinking about, but like, some of the things that people look at is, with something like Ethereum is like, having some sort of like income component that like Bitcoin doesn't have. Others are looking, at scarcity and like, comparing different emission models with different L1s and tokens. But, what are some things that you were like, hey, like focus on this when you're talking to someone that's brand new to digital assets?
So I think what I think is most important is to bring the lens that you're most comfortable with, right? So if the way that you think about it is, I usually look at stocks and that's like kind of how I run my PA and, I'm going to look at, the payment sector. Well, like look at it through that lens, like start with what you're comfortable with and then push out from there. And I think that's one of the things I really love about digital assets is people access it through it's like the blind men with the elephant, right? It's like everybody grabs a different part and is like, it's an equity, like it's a disruptive technology, it's like a hedge against the system, it's like a risk asset, it's it's a safe harbor. It's like all things to all people. But I think what it is that people access it through this sort of framework and investing lens that they come from. And I think that's really important, to start where you're comfortable and then start to challenge yourself. And I mean, I think for me, a really natural one is like sort of this concept of looking at particularly Bitcoin in terms of like a macro lens. And I'm definitely not a Bitcoin maxi, but looking at Bitcoin through a macro lens and thinking about it in terms of how do you evaluate like a sovereign balance sheet, and like, should we have some concerns here at debt to GDP over 120%?
Huh.
It's like an insane number, right? It's a really insane number.
Everything's normal.
Yeah. I mean, if it was anybody else, like the IMF would be all over them, right?
Yeah.
So
No, I think that's definitely interesting. I mean, so kind of keeping on that pace, like when you look at the different narratives around digital assets, cryptocurrency, self-sovereignty, inflation hedging, how do you see that influencing investor, overall market perception of these products? Like, what's your take on that?
So I think that self-sovereign, this is like one of the reasons I love working in this space, is that self-sovereignty like appeals to people, and I often find that the people it appeals to are absolutely interesting, even if I don't agree with them, and really individual. So I mean, it's what kind of makes the space fun and a fun place to work. But I think that there's like a point at which you start to pull together different, for example, like macro factors. And to use the example of Bitcoin, and we could also talk about it in the context of stablecoins, right? But if you say, oh, my concern is inflation, or my concern is like deficit, my concern is debt to GDP, my concern is one of these sort of, these like sovereign balance sheet factors, I think it's a real struggle to say, how do I tie all of those things together? And then how do I quantify and model that? And especially, going forward. So how can I think about getting to sort of price estimates, projections? How do I build a forward-looking model based on these types of inputs? And I think that the way that I think of as being sort of most accessible, like an all-in-one way to kind of access that, is thinking about dollar dominance, right? And so declining dollar dominance over the past 20 years, it's down from, 70 something percent of foreign reserves to a little over 55% of foreign reserves globally in 20 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that to me is something that makes it accessible and quantifiable. And I think that, at least in terms of thinking about other types of tokens, and particularly sectors, I think that self-sovereignty, I think of it sort of more as being an on-chain maxi. Like, I'm a middle-aged mom of 3. And I look like, and right. And so one, I feel like if you're a, founder of VC startup, like I am your target market, because I am totally willing to try these things, but you have to make it so that it works in my, in the constraints of my life. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have like unlimited time to spend on GitHub and, till 2 a.m. Like, I got kids I got to put to bed. But I think that in each of the sort of different sectors, whether it's gaming, whether it is payments, whether it is storage, whether it is, shared compute power, whether it's social, I think that there's a really strong argument for changing the economics of what has essentially been the technology model for the past 20 years. Like, yeah, why am I not making money off my data? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I would love to know that, right? Why am I not taking, why can I not own, I don't know, all the stuff my kids buy in Roblox and like move it,
Yeah.
right? Or sell it when they stop playing Roblox? Like, why do we not have property rights and intellectual property in gaming? I mean, I think there are things that just resonate, and it's a flavor of self-sovereignty in an economic form.
Yeah. I think continuing down the chain of just these different use cases, I think even in your origin story, you mentioned, being is it not two income household as people are used to, but two currency household. And so for you guys, like that's something in the US that a lot of people don't have the pain points of, is because they have the US dollar, they have US bank account access, but for you, just, being very active in both, Brazil and the US and having to change money frequently, there's obviously like high fees there. So, stable coins have been, heralded as one of the like proven use cases, of digital assets, but for you in your position, you can't necessarily get a return investing in stable coins. So beyond that, like how do you look at, use cases like tokenization and DePIN? And do you feel like, or what, which of those or what pieces of those do you feel like are closest to being like stable coins as like a proven model that's going to be here for a while?
So at the risk of sounding like everybody in TradFi digital assets, I'm really excited about tokenization. So I'm really excited about tokenization. I
You
mean,
say that
one of
once
the
more
things that
for
happened
us?
to me,
Are you really
yeah, I was like,
excited?
yay,
All right.
tokenization, revolutionizing
But you didn't
finance.
say it right. You gotta say RWA.
Like there's nothing like coming from banking and being like risk-weighted assets.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Yeah. But but I think that so right now I am a consumer of tokenized, right, assets. And I love experimenting and playing with them. I actually, tease like the team over at Franklin Templeton that like
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be their employee of the month because they go around. I'm like, everybody should be trying Benji. Let's
Yeah.
all like onboard Benji and practice. Because we should all be learning from these things and like watching how this sector evolves. And obviously I'm not gonna qualify for a Biddle like subscription. So right, we're gonna start with Benji.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that happened to me after being I guess crypto native for many years, and then coming back to like trying to do anything in equities like PA, I'm always like, oh my God, like it hasn't settled. The money went to the wrong account because I can't,
Mhm.
it takes me a little while to realize, oh no, wait, like it's not gonna show up like at the end of the day. It takes that mystery time to go through DTCC. But I think what amazes me about tokenization is like, of course, I want to be able to move and trade things 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, I don't actually want to be able to do it in the middle of the night, but I need to be able to do it after market hours. I need to, be able to do it in the morning before the market opens, at the end of the day when you have time, right? You want instant settlement. I just say can't I feel like there's no possible excuse for why that can't happen. Um, and when we talk about tokenization within the institutional structure and across from an industry perspective, asset managers have two different ways that they can interact with tokenization. And so we can engage with tokenization in terms of putting our funds and products on chain in a tokenized form. But we can also be a buy side consumer of tokenized underlying assets. And that would be the equivalent of tokenizing the activity that happens on the trading floor,
Mhm.
equities, fixed income. And I think that right now there are signs of that, but I think it's a really slow path for that happening in the US. I don't think it's around the corner. And I think that if you don't have the ability to sort of tokenize the underlying asset or reduce as much as possible the intertemporal mismatch between your fund and the underlying asset, then it's not a great idea to tokenize something. And I think you've seen that from everything that we've sort of like has come out of across the industry over the past couple of years. It's like sort of the two ends of the barbell
Mhm.
in terms of liquidity. It's either money market funds, things that are as close as possible, right, to moving at that speed, or it's illiquid alternatives where it has like this benefit of introducing liquidity into an asset class that is not liquid. I will say I have some questions about how managers feel about that over the long term. Like, do you really want a 24-hour 7, 24/7, 365 mark to market of like
Yeah.
your illiquid portfolio? I think that, well, so I have some questions about how that shapes up over time. But I think that we have not tokenized anything, and we are purposely moving slowly in
Mm.
tokenization. And I think uh, I guess I feel strongly that it's not clear to me there's a huge first mover advantage there,
Hmm.
right? I think that we saw people who tokenized things had to build it from scratch 3 years ago. And, you know, you can you can jump on a call with like 4 different firms and do tokenization as a service. It's like you put in the fund and outspit the tokens, and it's,
Right.
I want it on this chain and I want it in this format and I want it for this jurisdiction and right. And so I think the infrastructure continues to evolve and move really quickly in this space. And I kind of am waiting to sort of see where that goes. And we've seen everybody who's issued something, they learned from the people who issued before them.
Mhm.
And like you see that in the evolution of like money market funds, money market fund equivalents. And it's super interesting. And I think it's really exciting. And then, sorry, I'll pause there because like I'm a talker.
No, this is great. I mean,
Yeah.
this all ties together. Like, so it's interesting because like if you look back at historically, so I started my career on the trading floor, and it was still open outcry, but with you had pen tabs, everything. And historically, like when you look at new technologies, things that are going to revolutionize, change how things are done. I mean, I'm guilty of this. Like when you look at these technologies, you're like, yeah, right. This isn't no way is this gonna take off. But if you take yourself and if you're in the thick of it every day, you're probably gonna have a different view than someone who looks at it from like the outside in. So I think I'm with you on this, like on this tokenization stuff. I think tokenization is going to be in almost every product long term. However, I don't think people really care that, like an asset manager, I don't think he's going to ask for a tokenization. Like, it's not like he's going to be like, I need that fund tokenized and it has to be on this blockchain, things like that. So, I mean, that being said, let's switch it up a little though. And crypto voter, you've been hearing a lot about it in the press. What are the characteristics really of a crypto voter? And really, how is this, I would say, the demographic how is it really changing the political campaigns and everything going on?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting sort of evolution to watch. I feel like we started to really see polling that indicated that there were these crypto voters. And then it was like, okay, there are single issue crypto voters. And in, sort of I think it was the winter, and then we saw sort of that gain momentum in the spring. And then we started to see, right, different campaigns start to take notice of it, either at the congressional level and, at the presidential level. And I think, and then obviously, like you participate in crypto Twitter, and it's like a pretty intense situation right now.
That could give you a
Um,
headache.
but yeah, so I think what I find most interesting, and people may not be aware, but the amount of money raised for sort of by crypto packs and donated by crypto related like corporate entities, I think it's something like 58% of federal campaign contributions a cycle are from crypto related companies, and it's the largest industry in terms of donations. The largest super PAC in this entire election cycle is a crypto super PAC,
Mhm.
which stuns people stuns non-crypto people when you tell them. They're like, no, it can't be. And you're like, no, it really is. And it happened since May. And I think and obviously crypto Twitter, you see a lot of frustration that despite having sort of being able to point to a lot of polling that says it's a critical voting block, despite having raised substantial, amounts of money and participating in the cycle, that there isn't the level of engagement, I think, that many people expect and want. And the piece that I've sort of been trying to understand, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, because I've been trying to I play devil's advocate when I have this conversation with my husband. And I wonder if the idea of a single issue crypto voter makes absolutely no sense to an established campaign. It's like, well, who are these people? And I think if you are not in the sort of ecosystem or the Twitter sphere, then I think it's entirely possible to hear a single issue crypto voter and be like, oh, that's sort of like a single issue, like fantasy football voter, or like a single issue, World of Warcraft voter. Like it makes no sense. You're like, who would vote along those lines,
Yeah.
right? Like if you don't know, if you don't have a bigger sense of the community, of the sort of values, of the reasons that people invest in the space, the reason that 20% of Americans hold crypto, I think that it could seem like a very bizarre demographic that like you can't really be serious, that they're like that just makes no sense. And I think it's really important that as a community, as an ecosystem, that we also convey what are like we use crypto voter as an identifier, but it actually means a lot of other things, right? So like if you have people who feel that strongly about crypto and identify in that way, chances are they have some like strong thoughts on like the deficit, strong thoughts on freedom of speech, strong thoughts on like all of these other very large, deep democratic issues. And it kind of gets rolled up and like crypto voter gets put on the top and people are like, oh, like 22-year-olds living in their mom's basement playing video games. It's like, no, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because it's like, who could be a single issue voter of something that is often referred to,
I
in a
think it
very
goes,
dismissive
yeah,
way.
like
Yeah.
you hit it on the head. Like I think it goes to like like people have this preconceived idea in their head, like, oh, he's crypto. Oh, he must be like totally, doing something wrong or
Yeah. But I think that there's like I think it becomes an identifier for what is actually a really large, very colorful ton of people who feel very strongly about it, but it's like kind of stuck with the wrong label. And I think when, in the heat of a campaign and, you have all of these different advisors like around the table telling you, okay, well, like this constituency really matters and that constituency really matters. And it's like, I don't think like 22-year-old video gamers comes up. And I think that we have this perception of that sort of hinders us from being taken seriously or understanding like what these larger, very real political, economic, social issues are that motivate people, to be involved in this space and feel strongly about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had to look it up, so I don't know this off the top of my head, but James Carville, the Raging Cajun, Democratic
Yeah.
strategist. So in 1992, he says, it's the economy, stupid. And so, I think, beyond going like just crypto itself, it really speaks to a lot larger amount of issues that underlie just economic security for, each individual citizen, which I think like there's obviously a better PR campaign and, there's needs to be like education and to be very fair to like the average person, there's a ton of scams. They see Terra
Yeah,
Luna, they see SBF,
absolutely.
ton of reasons why they shouldn't trust that. But I definitely see is like, like you mentioned on the deficit, big problem, not a lot of good solutions. And so like crypto and Bitcoin and digital assets as a whole, it's like, hey, this is a pretty good, attempt at trying to find a solution for this. Same thing with like, Social Security is like the younger generation, maybe not all like, all of Gen Z doesn't love crypto, but a lot of them are very interested in it because, they feel like, oh, why would I pay into Social Security? Like crypto, there's a lot of scams. There's also a lot of scams of like, oh, you're going to pay into this, and then it's just going to be, say, like the baby boomer retirement or Gen X retirement, but it's not going to trickle down to you. And so, I feel like, yeah, there's all these other issues created in traditional finance markets, traditional, benefits and entitlements, and our whole economy that have driven people to look at either digital assets, whether it's a blockchain or some other type of form of money, to where they can trust in it long term.
Look at the FX side too. Like, I mean, Blue, you brought up a great point on the FX side, like that most Americans don't even think about. Like I spent a good amount of time in Canada. Yes, you can bring $20 there, US, and people will take that. Like it's, they're like, yep, I'll take that. But then you bring Canadian dollars to the US, people are like, what's that? Like it's a foreign object to us. And that they're like, we don't have, yes, we have struggles in the US, big time. Don't get me wrong. But when you look at like the US to many other monetary systems, I mean, I can only imagine like some of these other countries and the inflation rate that they're facing, like how do you even survive?
Yeah, I mean, I think so there was a really great paper by Reinhardt and Rogoff that was a couple of years ago. It was probably like a year and a half ago it was published, but it talked about Bitcoin being used as like both a store of value and a means of transaction, particularly in developing and emerging economies. I would actually expect that winds up transitioning to stablecoins, right? As, over time, like as a medium of transaction. But this is one of the things that seems like a no-brainer to
Yeah.
me, which is stablecoins just make your life so much easier. Oh, I mean, like being able to instantly transfer and move money and to not have to like pay an exorbitant fee. So
That's
I've
the key
started to
right
go places and it's like, this is how much it is to like put this on your credit card, or you can pay cash. And I was like, I don't think I've had like actual cash in my wallet. And like, I don't even know where there's an ATM near my house. Right. And so the ability to sort of seamlessly, instantly move money around the world, one, it will, yes, we absolutely recognize that like there will be bad actors who exploit that, who were, that's always going to be the case. I think there's a lot of tools in terms of on-chain analytics that make it somewhat of a better sort of forum for it to be happening because the tools are better in terms of analysis and financial crimes. But I think the other argument is that we should encourage dollar-backed and dollar-denominated stablecoins as a means of like preserving and extending dollar dominance in the world financial system,
Spot on.
right? Like, and I think that I've never heard anyone make a cogent argument against that. Like I've heard like many people make arguments for it, but I don't know if anyone has come up with a sort of cogent reason why that wouldn't be the case. But it just is like it's like such a no-brainer. It's introducing regulation so that like we participate, have a regulated environment for stablecoins in the US so they're dollar backed, so that we're not seeing like the launch of and growth of multiple other different denominated stablecoins.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I know we're coming up here at end of our time. That being said, I think one of the things we wanted to touch on, in your view, what's the future of DePIN? Maybe explain what DePIN is and really how do you see it, for all the listeners that we're trying to get in that are not maybe part of the lingo. How do you see that affecting investment strategies, in digital assets and crypto?
So DePIN is decentralized physical infrastructure network. So it's I guess I would describe it as sort of, this is going to make a lot of people but I would describe it as like the blockchain of things, right? So you have like Internet of Things. This is like blockchain of things.
Web 4? No, I'm kidding.
I don't even know, right? Like you can't even keep up anymore. But it is combining like physical infrastructure, and it can be something like shared computing power, right? So where participants, but it shifts to a read write own sort of, it shifts the economics of different types of infrastructure. So imagine a network provider where you can run your own hotspot, right? Like internet hotspot, and you can get paid to do so. I actually have an email into my boss to be like, so can we, I want to put one on the trading floor in Pratt in our headquarters and be like, all right, let's do this. Let's link it to our wallet. Let's right. Let's participate.
I have something to say about that.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I don't even think we may not even know who to ask to get it approved. I'm not even sure where it goes. So I'm calling around. I'm gonna call the guys in enterprise security and ask them too. I think that they'll actually probably be psyched. I was like, hey, I have an idea. And they're like, oh my God, no. But physical sort of because it is physical things. It can be solar panels, it can be shared internet computing, it can be like the equivalent of like a Waze, it can be like phone hotspots, internet hotspots. It can be a lot of different physical things. And what I think it does is I really like it because one, it gives you a way to access what are very different economics works. And I think that experiencing that changes your perspective. I think it then causes you to open Instagram or open Twitter and be like, wait, so I'm not making any money and I'm training their AI system. Like, how is like what's in it for me?
Yeah.
And I think we need to get people to a point where they ask that in order for a lot of Web3 to sort of really take off. Is you need the average consumer, or like the middle-aged mom of three, to be like, what's in it for me? Like, how am I making money off of this? And I think that DePIN allows a really tangible way of doing that in an industry that is often not that accessible. Like when you sit down and are like, let's talk code, let's talk white papers. Like a lot of people, their eyes glaze over. And I'm like, here, plug this in at your house and other people can use it and nobody owns your data and you're going to be paid to run like the hotspot. And people are like, I get that. That makes sense. I'm going to do a little like shout out plug for last summer's T Rowe Digital Assets intern, Dylan Bain, who's now at Macellari.
Dylan, nice.
And Dylan. And he's done a couple of great deep dives on DePIN on like YouTube and in their publications. You should definitely have him on. He's terrific. I was like, yeah, that's my summer intern. We're all going to be working for him by the end of the summer.
Shout out Dylan.
Yeah.
So Blue, to wrap it up, so you mentioned you're a mom of three. Sean is a father of three daughters, and he's done a phenomenal job of, pushing forward a roundtable, we're going to have set in the future in a month or so, just women in digital assets. What has your experience been? What can we do to bring more women into digital assets? How has your experience networking been? What would you say to others to try to encourage, to be less male dominated industry?
I've had a phenomenal experience as a woman in digital assets, a woman in crypto. I belong to a group called Real Mamas of Crypto.
Nice.
And I think there's like 85 of us, and we have like t-shirts.
Awesome.
We wear them at like, we wear them to consensus. We wear them to permissionless. And like being in crypto is hard. Like being a mom in crypto is hardcore. And I think that it's one of the benefits is that because it is a really heavily male-dominated field, and I say that coming from hedge funds and private equity, right?
Which is
So
also
that's like really saying a
dominated.
lot. Yeah, and this is like a whole new level. But I think one of the things that happen is that the network that women create and welcome other women into is absolutely phenomenal. So like if I don't know how to do something or I want to figure something out, or I'm like, I want to find somebody at this protocol or at this firm or at this service provider, like I will go to like my network of women, and it is amazing.
Yeah.
Like the women will go to bat for you in a way that I think like all the guys are really missing out.
Yeah.
And all my kids, I make like t-shirts and stuff. Cause like I'm a mom in crypto, right? So like I make t-shirts for people and I get them out at conferences and people have a baby and I like send them a, Genesis block onesie and things like that. and all my kids have.
You have one of those
all my kids
cricket
have
things
t-shirts.
that you make the shirts.
Yeah, no, actually, I actually figured out how to do it. It's like such a money losing proposition because like I'm like, oh no, it's like 36 hours until consensus. I have to get my t-shirt. So it's like, let me spend $70 making and express shipping a shirt. So like
sounds
a $6 shirt.
Sounds like a working mom.
Yeah, it's like not optimal, but I give all my kids have shirts that say my mom works at Bitcoin, and I like sent them all like on the day of the halving. I sent them all to school, and my mom works at Bitcoin.
I like that.
I love it.
Yeah, we need one. Well, Blue, this has been a phenomenal conversation. What's the best way to follow you? Is it Twitter? Is it LinkedIn? Like, where are you most active where our listeners can go back and just track and see how you're doing?
I'm essentially like 100% anonymous on the web.
Okay. So you just got to come back on the pod. So let's.
Yeah. So it's more like I'm probably following them and they don't know it.
Love it. Well, we'll definitely be bringing you back on. And if anybody are you going to any conferences in the near future?
Yeah, I am. So I'm going to be in Florida for an industry one. I think I am not making permissionless this year, but I am. The whole family is going to Bitcoin in Las Vegas, right? Like for our annual, like the kids and all. It's a great place for kids. I know it sounds weird, but they actually like they fit right in. Like you'd be amazed.
Yeah.
Free stuff and stickers, and so and then Consensus. I think I've been to Consensus every year except for the year I was very pregnant. I couldn't go anywhere. But thank you guys so much for having me on, and I really enjoyed this. And we're gonna get more women on here.
Love it.
I have a long list of really expert women guests if you're
Let's
interested.
bring them
Yeah,
on.
there's open seats. So thanks for
Thanks.